Swiggles here, and this is going to be your guitar tone tutorial. After a lot of requests, which I really appreciate, you guys asked me to make a guitar tone tutorial where I'm going to talk about how I make my pod farm and my guitar rig tones for recording. And I'm going to include all the tones for you guys that I make to download, so feel free to use them. I thoroughly appreciate you guys doing that. Now, to watch this video, I'm going to make it easy. Check the description. If you guys want to see the pod farm one, just keep watching. And if you want to see the guitar rig one, just skip ahead in the timestamp. And hopefully, if I don't answer your questions in the video, just leave them in the comment section and I will get to every single one. Alright, let's do it. I'm going to preface just a couple things like I always do. First of all, tone is 100% subjective. If you listen to rock, metal, jazz, blues, anything, everyone has a different tone, and there's some general principles, but music is music. There's no real rules. I will say the principle that you're playing is almost entirely your tone is one thing I want to preach. If you're not playing at your absolute best, or if you haven't been playing for a long time, getting better equipment or working on your tone more may not change some of the things that you really need to fix up. So tone is in the fingers and tone is subjective. That being said, this is what I would recommend you do. Tones vary guitar to guitar, so do not expect to sound exactly like anyone else or any other guitar just because the same tone. That being said, I'm going to throw you guys a picture of the guitar I'm using, or a screenshot quickly. It's my ESP with a DiMarzio Crunch Lab in the bridge and a stock neck pickup, of course. I'm tuned in drop C. The strings I'm using are 10 to 52 gauge. I believe it's skinny top, heavy bottom, which is Ernie Ball strings, and they sound really good. And I'm using a 1.5 millimeter pick. I'm telling you all this because those are all factors you might want to play with for your tone. I'm going to start with the clinge. Let's just go into objects. So this is the chain, or the order of components I use in a guitar rig that we're virtually creating. Now the first thing you want to do is you want to check that your levels are good. And I'm going to turn off this gate button. I'll tell you what that is later. So your input should be where you're getting a strong enough signal from your guitar itself. If you have active pickups, then you might be noticing it's a little louder than your friends who has passive. All that really means is the amount of volume coming out of your guitar, it's not going to be the same. So, and what you want to really do is check how quiet it can be at your quietest, and most importantly, check how loud you will be. Now your output's going to be kind of the same thing, but it's going to change, so you don't want to worry about that. You can do a noise gate right here. So this is called a global gate because it's going to be before the entire all of our effects and amps and stuff. And what a noise gate really is doing is it's a smart computer program, at least here, or a physical device that cuts off noise. Essentially, all the sound that you're not wanting to come out of your guitar, all the not notes, the hums, the buzzes, there's going to be a limitation on how much you want on that. Now, if you already know volume is measured in decibels, I like to keep mine a little bit, especially the global gate, a little bit open because I don't want to lose some of the hairiness and the fuzziness. What you want to do is have your noise gate in front here, and unfortunately this isn't a really good way to estimate how your noise gate's going to act. So for right now, let's just turn the knobs way down. And now, this is where you need to try everything. If you ever go to a guitar store and you see all the guitars and you're curious how things sound, same thing goes for amps, especially for tone. If you have a tone in mind because you heard it on the radio or on your favorite song, you can try to chase it, but a lot of the times you're not going to like what you're creating, so try out everything. That being said, the more you know about famous amps and famous guitars, the better you're going to have, the better idea you're going to have of what kind of amp or guitar gets what kind of tone for what kind of music. So I personally have enjoyed using the tread plate, but I also, for metal, I personally like, for the clean tone we're going to make, using the jazz clean. So I'm going to bring that one out. That being said, you should probably try out a lot of the ones that are intended for the style of music you want. If you try the citrus, which is based on the famous orange amps, you're going to get a little bit of dirt, and I think that's going to be great for a different style of music personally. You can also try using the Piazza Acoustic. It's going to be a cleaner acoustic amp simulation. So now that we have an amp out, I'm just going to put everything at midnight or 50%, just so that we can start playing around. Now the drive is something that's going to add a lot of hair to a clean sound, so I tend to not want that to be there. But let's just... So I'm going to boost the volume just so that I can hear what I'm doing. You want to try it out on all pickups, of course, because you want to make sure you can use your tone in all sorts of settings. Man, I'm nailing these chords. Alright, so the Jazz Clean is emulating a combo amplifier. That means that there's a machine called a preamp that's going to be increasing your volume, controlling the equalization, the characteristics of your frequency range, as well as a speaker or a cabinet. And here we've got a condenser microphone. You can't control it here. Actually, I lied, you can. Now, what is this? Okay, room is how much room sound, or the echoes, the reverberation of what you're hearing, and the distance also. So if I do this, it sounds far away. If I do this, it's like the mic's right attached to it. So they give you some defaults, but there's a little bit of warmth in this option if we change the microphone to the SM57 off axis. You can also try a 421 dynamic microphone, which might give us a... Now, after an amplifier, we can add a lot of different effects, but one of them for clean sound is a compressor that I personally like, just because it's going to boost our signal. And I have pretty quiet pickups. Now, what is this button? The threshold is the point at which this compressor is going to start working. So if the volume's, if we set it all the way to minus 63 decibels, the second that the guitar signal and the compressor hears anything at 63, which is, you know, very, very quiet, that's what our gate's at actually, then it's going to start boosting the signal 7 decibels. So this is a very, very sensitive setting. Now, we don't even have a lot of sound coming out there. We might have it around 37, maybe 35. I personally like that. Now, one thing we want to watch is this output, because now that I've added a compressor, it's smoothing out the signals, as the word compressor means. The idea is to have a uniform, stronger sound, and especially if we're going to be playing single notes. So I personally don't see too much wrong with it. Reduce your threshold if you feel it's too poppy. There's a lot of things about this tone that I don't like right now. For example, we don't have any reverb that we might want. Now personally, I've started using reverb as a separate track effect in my Reaper. As most of you guys know, reverb is an effect that adds the effect of echo. It creates a larger sound as if you were in a hall, or maybe if we used a slap plate, it's just going to have this bounce effect, or any of them. Now the first one, pre-delay, it kind of is implying what you think it might be, that the signal that's being reverberated is coming earlier. So you're going to have a softer effect. Now decay is how long it takes before the reverb stops being played, or that effect stops being active. If we want a really long clean tone, maybe we're versus. So the higher I have it, you know, the faster it's going to want to get rid of it. Now tone is a characteristic, just like your tone knob might be for a distortion pedal, and we can play with the equalization. So there's a little bit of brightness here. And the mix, how much do we want of the dry signal, which is where there's no reverb, or 100% would be nothing but wet mix. So obviously we want to play around with that, and if you're going to add reverb in your actual mix again, don't put too much in the tone itself. Let's try analyzing what all these are going to do for our sound. So drive in a clean tone, let's see what it'll do. You can hear the warbling, warmthy sound of a more distorted signal. And maybe we want that sometimes. This is on my bridge pickup now, just because you need to check both pickups and all settings, of course, to see what kind of tone we're going to create. This is our middle setting. It's a little more of a twang. The characteristics of a clean channel are going to be maybe a little more emphasized for me if I keep the volume even higher, just so I can pick out. But we don't want to start distorting the signal or adding any noise or unwanted sound. And of course, as we do this, we should increase our noise gate to avoid any of these problems. The threshold is where the noise gate is going to cut off. Now this decay is going to change how fast we want it shut off. So the second it hears a noise, now let's see what kind of tone we can create just by noodling. A lot of this video is going to be just me noodling, so I hope you guys understand. For all you jazzy people, be sure to check how your tone knob on your guitar can play a role in the clean tone. Perhaps the mids might give me some body too. Now let's see what treble does. Now presence is, in an artistic way of describing it, how much you're going to be hearing of the tone versus how much the tone sounds maybe contained is the word I like to use. So I'm going to be staying on my neck pickup now. So this is a little overt, a little more poppier. Now if I took all of it away, just so that you understand the concept. Now that we have that, what else can we add? How about some delay? Now delay is something that I personally think should be before reverb, just because it's going to get really annoying and really loud. Time is how long it takes before it's going to replay the signal that's come through so far. We've got a small time, you can play around with it. So this one's kind of like a U2 sort of effect, maybe. Well, the streets have no names. Okay, feedback. Feedback's gonna be versus. Now, lows and highs are the frequency of the delays. I've never really seen the need to mess with them. The most important thing, of course, is mix, which is how loud we want the delay to be. Last thing we might want to try out is a chorus pedal. I'm going to put it before the delay, of course, so that we don't have too much problem. Reduce the mix. Now we're going to work on a classic rock tone. First thing we're going to do for our rhythm tone is similar. We want to get rid of all that fuzz that's coming from the guitar. We can use the same settings for our last one for noise gate because the guitar hasn't really changed. It's everything that's going to come after. So keep that in mind. While the order of parts is going to be a little different, I'm going to add the amp first and then put pedals behind it. That way I know exactly what I'm going to do. Now the tricky part is we have a plexi jump, a plexi lead, And we've got this 1990 British J800, and they all look the same. They're all emulating the famous Marshall amps, and I personally love the sound of both of these, so we're going to have to give it a shot. Now what happens in Pod Farm is he automatically gave me a cabinet. We're just going to stick with it for now, but I think it's extremely important that you all try out everything. So I'm going to be using my bridge pickup here. Let's definitely start around 50. Now what I'm basically using for all of these tutorials is just my ear and trying to understand what I want. Now the gain is basically going to be raising things and overriding the signal, causing distortion. So that's on 40. Now if it were on 100, it's a little oversaturated, a little more sensitive to my sweeping fingers. So we're just going to want to put it, of course, start it at a reasonable amount and lower or gain it. Now, there's a lot of mud right now, so I might want to trim back the mids and boost the treble a little. Presence will also give you a little bit more attack on the sound to the ears. Now I do want a little bit more of the bass. Let's bring back some of the mids and see how we like that. With a little more presence, I might be able to get more note definition when I play something like a minor chord. It's a good idea to always check some of the detail in your tones so that it's not too fuzzy, unless you're going for that. I might want to add a distortion pedal behind it. Now there's different kinds of pedals. Now what we're going to look at is the classic distortion, the facial fuzz, the fuzz pie, and the screamer. Screamer I use mostly for metal tones, so let's just try out in order, I guess, the facial fuzz. A fuzz pedal is going to add a little bit of flavor, and it's also going to be a lot fuzzier, something akin to Hendrix or Eric Johnson, if you will. So let's just try a little reduce. Maybe a little more. Drive is going to affect a little more the volume with a side effect of having this bite, but gain is going to be the one that gives you the distortion that you're looking for. So I don't mind this. Now the tone knob, of course, is kind of like an equalization all in one. I'm going to be on my bridge for a second. I like this one. It's a little more in your face. Now as a result, I might want to normally boost my gain down, but the gain of an amp sometimes is a little nicer, so we might just want to balance it out. I'm starting to like this tone now. Now there's a little bit of experimentation we can play with here. While they matched me with the 4x12 Green 25s amp here, there's a lot of different amps to play with. For example, if I used a British Celestions, we get a little bit of brightness, and that's really important. But let's see what we can do. Now, anything else that we can add to make this suitable for lead playing might be any of these effects you like, maybe some digital delay. We can use a tube echo since it's more vintage. So, let's try that. Last but not least, if you want, you can add some reverb, but this time I'm going to add the slap plate, just because it's a little more vintage. Before we're done, I'm going to try the different distortion pedals so you can see what kind of effect it'll have. So it's giving me a very different tone characteristically. I might want to drop some of this. Maybe keep up the drive, but lower the gain. So that's how I would do a more classic rock oriented tone. The moment you guys have been waiting for, probably, how to make a rhythm tone with Pod Farm. Let's go ahead and add a noise gate. Very, very important. We might even have to add a couple. We're going to have a tighter decay here also because we're going to be on and off. And we want as little noise to come in because the pick attack is a lot of the definition in a metal music. Now, let's start and pick out an amp. Now, the amp of choice that we could use ranges. I know most of you guys have tried the Spinal Puppet and the tread plate. I don't see too much wrong with using the tread plate, but it's one of the most commonly used ones in the community, and as a result, it might make you feel like you're emulating someone else's sound, and it also sounds way too muddy for my taste. I personally like these two. Let's try the tread plate dual. We're going to boost that a lot. Now, there's a lot of things in this tone that we're going to be doing a little differently. Now, we can also play with the microphone placement. This one's getting me some good results. And there's also something very important to put in before the amp, which is a distortion pedal. This is going to give it the bite that we need, but we also don't want it to give too much of the dirtiness, or else we're not going to have something tight. So now there's no definition right now in these notes, so we're going to want to play around with a lot of knobs. Like the tone, for example, is going to carve some of the EQ. Now the drive for metal should be just enough to carry you, but not enough to where it's going to muddy up your notes. So let's start it rather low. Too low. We're not getting too much definition here, so maybe we're going to have to cut some frequencies. Now, a lot of bands are going to drop the mids, and there's a decent amount of reason why, but as a result, we're going to lose some of the definition. So keep that in mind. Now I'm going to boost the presence until we get just too much sharpness, and maybe a little bit of trebles too. Now, one thing that you might consider doing, just to tighten up, is some people might use a compressor, or even this little compressor pedal. Now, what it's basically going to do is even out your signal, and the sensitivity you might want very low, and as a result, you might get something a little smoother at the cost of the dynamics. Whoops. As you drop the sensitivity, you're going to notice that it's compressing a little more. So that's what I would consider pretty tight, because there's no real sound getting out once I'm done playing. Now what we can do afterwards, of course, is we can add this 4-band EQ. What's this going to do is it's going to characterize some of the sound. So if I want more low end, I might give a gain to the first part. We can also see where exactly I want to start the gain. Of course, remember, the more you gain, the more obvious it is, and you may not want that. So it's not too bad. I don't see any reason to cut it off. Now, what you might want to do here is search for frequencies or areas that you want to boost or retain, just like EQing and mixing. I'm going to give this a baby boost. course, we might want to do the same up here, but I think I might want to reduce some frequencies. Only a little though. Or maybe not at all. It's not too bad. The trick here is you don't want to have to add too much more else afterwards, so you do want to have a pretty good tone to begin with. Now, I am using this amp, but what if we changed it? Okay, I like that riff. Maybe you'll use it. For the most part, this is kind of the idea that I would really use for my tones. Now, if we wanted to make it into something like a crazy lead, especially for modern sort of metal, then I'm just going to add some reverb and delays. Hopefully, you guys can bear through all the same stuff I've been doing. Okay, here's going to be the guitar rig tutorial. So let's get started in making a clean tone with Guitar Rig 5. When setting up my guitar rig, we're going to look through a couple settings first. Up here we've got our input volume with left and or right depending on our interface. I'm using a mono interface, so we'll just leave it left. And we want to make sure the input volume is good. Sounds about good right now. And we also have a built-in noise gate. We can shut it off, but I'm going to leave it on just as a precaution. And just like in the pod farm section, we can leave this one pretty high up. I just want to get rid of any unnecessary hiss, but I don't want to start killing any of the tone or unwanted fuzz just yet. Now the output volume we're going to vary, and we even have a hard limiter here. I'll leave it on, but ideally we don't want to have to use this. So we have the output volume just about right, but we're going to want to watch that as we start. First thing I want to do is get a nice amplifier. So we're going to look in the components section, and I'm going to use categories and amplifiers. And for a clean tone, I found that I actually enjoy the twang reverb. It may not be everyone's favorite, but it's definitely one of mine. And we're going to try to adjust everything to midway before we adjust. Maybe no reverb. Definitely not going to play with any effects or reverbs just yet. And I'm going to stick to the matched cabinet they gave, but always experiment so that you can get different sounds. Now, one issue we're going to have is volume. So because my pickups are a little quiet, since we're getting some clipping, I'm going to reduce this. Once you have a good amount of volume though, you can generally gauge what the tone is going to sound like. I can carve the shape of it just like we would do any other ones. The treble, of course, is going to modify how much of the trebles and higher frequencies that we hear. The mids might give it a little bit more body. The bass frequencies may not matter once we're putting them in a mix. Of course, now that we have something kind of solid, play around with your different pickup selections so you know you can use this tone for different uses. For the cabinet, we can add some air, which will make a less direct impact to the sound. We can also adjust how much of two different microphones are being used here. And you can always add more information just by clicking this drop down. Same goes for our amplifier, even though I'm pretty happy with what we have right now. Although I can turn up a little bit of reverbs. And let's click that on. As a result of having more reverb, I'll probably make it a little drier tone on the cabinet. Of course, with the clean tone, we're going to have a little bit more of a simple, we're going to have a little simpler chain. But we can play with different effects that we like. For example, we could add delay. Where's delay? I personally like the psych delay. With delay, we can have a mixture of dry and wet, wet being the affected sound, and dry being our original sound. Feedback will be how loud we hear it. And how long it's going to last. Feedback will be how long it's going to last. And time is going to be how long it takes before it starts playing. We can even reverse it. We can also add a compressor, which could both increase the volume that we have and here, let's try using one of the more vintage sounds. We could use that at the beginning, and that'll even out the signals. There's both a gain and a peak reduction when we go over a certain point. The harshness will be based on these controls. Notice how quiet it is. Then if we reduce this, we do have a certain smoothness about it that I really appreciate. Now, one thing I definitely want to get rid of is any hiss. So before any of my chains, I always add a noise reduction. Now, if you go ahead and leave your guitar exactly as is and maybe shake it a little to get some of that natural string rattling, you can click learn and it'll automatically set it. But my guitar is so quiet already that it's not going to give me a good example, so I'll leave it around 53. If we go into options, we can check the release, which is how long it takes before it stops it. So if we set the release really low, it'll come back really fast. But if we set it really high, we might still have some of the noise reduction going on a little bit later. Now that we've boosted the gain, there is just a bit of hair to it. So if you want to get rid of that, you might want to adjust some of these so that you're not clipping at the individual components. But I personally find this tone to be perfect for me. So let's go ahead and save this. Now I'm going to show you guys how to make a classic rock oriented sound. Now for something good and classic rocky, I kind of like using the lead 800. So I'm going to drop that one in, and we're going to try to set everything at 12 o'clock. We're going to be playing with a little bit of a different situation here. So one piece of advice I'd highly suggest is think about your favorite music and try to match some of the tones there, and then go from what you would prefer to hear. And that's kind of how I've gone about sculpting a lot of my tones. Now, the volume's not too high here, so let's try that. You can always keep track of your volume in the output, which is the final say, and the cabinet's even going to tell you how much volume's coming into it. See, we're now clipping, so we want to drop that a little. So, all these knobs are doing the same thing before. Now, the preamp is going to give us a little more of the hair and some of the drive, but it's not necessarily as dirty as some of the more metal amps. One thing to remember is that when you're going to stack a lot of these rhythm guitars together, be it one on each side, or maybe even if you're doing a quad tracking, then you don't want to have too much of this buzz going on, or else you're going to have a very unprecise, unarticulate sound. That was a tricky word. So keep that in mind. Now, same is going to go a little bit for the volume. We can also hit this boost button and play around with some of these other options, like the responsivity of the amp, which I think if you increase a little might give it a little bit of realism. So we're going to just keep adjusting little bits of that. Instead of using this boost, why don't we try a distortion pedal? For something like classic rock, you can't go wrong with the straight up distortion pedal, sort of based on the Boss one. Now the tone is going to sculpt the EQ of the sound, and we can add more distortion. We can also provide more volume to the root sound. So if we added more volume and less distortion, we might get a purer sound. Let's try reversing that. Notice how we lost a lot of articulation in that. I think that's a really important point here. So I try not to put too much distortion in this, although I do want it to be a characteristic. Maybe we'll lower the tone a little. Kind of sounds we can get if we add a little bit of reverb. I'm going to add vintage reverb. There's different types of reverbs, and if you know how real amps work and famous models, then you're going to have a better time figuring out which one's your favorite sound. Try them all. Alright, now the moment that I'm sure everyone's been waiting for. Let's work on some metal tones. So I'm going to set up everything just like we did before and walk you guys through it. I will say that you might want the noise reduction a little tighter because we don't want to get too much of that tight sound away. For this metal tone, I'm going to work with the Van 51. This is probably my favorite amplifier right now, so I'm really into it. And we're going to add the high gain. Set everything 5 o'clock. And I'm actually going to take away the cabinet they gave, and we're going to try out some of these. This is the legacy kit. Of course, any amplifier that you cabinet that you enjoy should be good enough. Boost a lot of the mids, some of the treble, and maybe reduce some of the pre-gain but increase the post-gain. That way we still have some detail, and we'll keep the presence up. I'm going to reduce the gain a lot more because I want to add a distortion pedal, and this time I'm going to use the Screamer. Screamer is the most simple one I find to use, and let's align everything like we do. I'm starting to like that one. Now, maybe we can get a little bassier. All this is just experimentation. I think we could also add a noise reduction here with a bit of a tighter release in case you wanted to do anything that was very fast-paced and more, dare say, genty. That way we're gonna have a close off on your noise reduction, and you're just gonna have the signal that either comes in or doesn't. So we can play with that. I think I'm gonna leave mine off. Another thing that we definitely can do is we can carve this. So let's try putting this after our cabinet, and this is an equalizer just like in our DAW, and we can adjust all of the frequencies in it just to our heart's content. So this is going to add a little bit of the low mids, like a little darker. You do want to kill maybe some of the mids to get more of a Metallica thrashy sound. But that's not what I'm going for here, so we can also add a little bit of hair to it. So I'm starting to really dig this. So now you want to make this into a lead tone that kind of matches it. So let's just begin with some ideas here. Some components of lead that I definitely want to utilize are some reverb. So let's get out the little reflector. if we want it to be a little more epic, but you know, you don't want to lose a lot of the tone. And if you're going to add reverb in your DAW, try to be minimal here. We might even want a little more gain as a result, especially if you want to do something like tapping. But you know, be sure that you're not adding so much that you start losing anything. I definitely would not have this extra noise reduction, because then we're just going to lose a lot of the flavor. We can also add some delay. Not so crazy. Now, one thing that you definitely want to play with to get a very diversified sound is take away your amp and then put a different one entirely. I'm going to try the gratifier. Now, one key component to realism that I use in my tones that I'm only going to brush up here is the use of impulse responses. Now, using a component known as a reflector in Guitar Rig, we can load files called impulse responses, which basically break down to being sound waves that capture the sound of anything, like a room, a type of reverb, or especially in the case of guitars, a cabinet. I've downloaded tons on my own, and there are a lot of free and a lot of paid ones. Explore what you like, and you can definitely get by with the free ones. I'm just going to use one that I like. Basically, this is emulating a real-world cabinet called a Randall. If you ever used a Randall cabinet, you're going to sort of recognize the sound here, and it's going to give a different kind of responsiveness that you just can't get with some of the built-in ones. I highly suggest that everybody looks into these for any program. That's essentially everything that I can cover when it comes to creating tones. The number one thing that you just got to remember is that tone is a lot about your hands, and you can make do with a lot of what you already have. And just keep experimenting. Tone is created by trial and error. Listen to more musicians, figure out how different guitars and different amps sound, and you'll be on your way to making some really cool tones. Thanks a lot for watching. Let me know if you guys want any future tutorials. I thrive on whatever you guys ask for, and leave all your questions and comments in the section below. Let me know if you like this tutorial, and have a good day. Happy tone searching.